I shed the tears. Thank you so much for joining us today in our next conversation about trust your gut, eat for satisfaction. Today we are here with Jacqueline Golden, an intuitive eating coach, and we are going to be talking about body acceptance. So Jacqueline, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thanks for asking me.
So first off, what is your favorite local Colorado food?
Well, it's hard because I grew up not like in a completely another part of the country, so I don't have like all that many preferences towards like native foods, but I would say I lean kind of towards a breakfast burrito. Now, that is a pretty like common food probably for some people, but where I am from, we are pretty taco heavy from Texas. So very taco heavy. We eat burritos there, but it was more breakfast tacos, not breakfast burrito. And while I love a good breakfast taco, still having something that's just like easy and like I get the point of like a handheld burrito for breakfast, and it's always like really cheap, which I like. So I would say I'm really into the breakfast burrito. Other than that, my husband is from Colorado, so he is a big fan of green chili. So I'm slowly learning to like it. I'm coming from a red chili place, so adjusting to the green chili because it's what he cooks at home.
Nice. Yeah, I love green chili in my breakfast burrito, and I feel like it's the great way to start any day that's full of like hiking or snowboarding or kayaking, anything. Like grab one and head out to the mountains.
Yes, I need lots of fuel.
Or how does your work impact your community?
Yeah, so my work, I mean, I do work on an individual level for the most part, but I've lately been getting into more community-based events, like directly in the Denver area. So I would say I impact people in a couple different ways. One way is I also teach yoga. It's not necessarily a part of my business, but it's something that I do just as like a passion. And I do try to weave in like the body acceptance and body respect and kind of kindness towards our bodies in my teaching. So definitely people I come across in the yoga studio and the way that they like move their bodies. I try to bring some influence there. And then other than that, I would say my community on a whole, like my goal with the impact that I have is not only for them to have a better relationship with their food and body individually, but also to be able to participate in a dialogue for generations to come. So like part of my why is that, you know, I was raised and ended up having some issues with food and with my body, and knew that, well, if I have kids, I don't want not just my kids, but like the next generation. I don't want them to struggle with the things that I went through and the stuff that I've dealt with and had to overcome. And just as far as the thoughts that people have about their bodies as it equates to self-worth and confidence. And so, and like nourishing yourself and your health. And so to me, I said, well, like I can start by impacting people individually, but in hopes that every life that I touch and have an impact on, that they then want to not just use that information for themselves, but want to have an impact on the culture that we live in. And so I try to equip them with ways to handle, you know, situations they might be in their community, so that they can, you know, kind of helps, I like to say, spread the anti-diet message. But, you know, that word anti-diet could be interchangeable with like body respect or body acceptance, anything that I really teach upon. Like I want them to kind of spread that message as well.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you.
And then, so you mentioned body respect and body positivity, or body acceptance. I feel like we hear a lot of different words used around this idea, body neutrality or body positivity. Do you feel like there's a difference between some of these terms, or do you tend to use them interchangeably?
Yeah, so there is definitely a difference. Sometimes I'll interchange them when I'm thinking about like big picture goals, like as far as how I hope that people will relate to their body one day. Like I hope it's kind, I hope they're accepting. I hope, you know, neutrality is a good place to be, but they all do mean different things. So I would say starting with body neutrality, neutrality is is basically what it sounds like, the idea of feeling really neutral. And so when I work with people, a lot of people are coming from a place where like acceptance seems really far away. And so instead of setting their goals, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, for people who are setting like goals around the food that they eat or cook at home, it's like you want to set them up to have realistic goals that they can actually achieve, versus setting them like at maybe the end goal way down the road. You need some benchmarks along the way. And so body neutrality is basically the idea of feeling neutral towards the body. So not harboring a lot of like negative feelings, but also there may not be a lot of positive feelings around it as well. And that goes to be said that most of these words I'm using, they fall under like an umbrella of body positivity. So so someone may come to me coming from a place of like a lot of hatred towards their body, a lot of, they really want to change their body, pretty negative emotions I've come across, like disgust, carelessness, frustration. And so getting them to a place first where body neutrality feels like a place they can get to, where they feel just kind of neutral, meaning they don't think about their body too much, and that their body doesn't really define them, which then can kind of lead to like body liberation. And body liberation is the idea that you are liberated from any like beliefs around your body and its ties to your worth. So that would be like recognizing that your body's, your body being a certain size does not mean anything about you. So kind of being liberated from a lot of those associations and feelings. And then body acceptance is the idea that you accept your body for what it is. So you no longer have those ideas about changing your body, and you are accepting of where you are currently, like mentally and physically. That does not, all of these does not mean you don't have bad days, right? Like we're human in the human experience. So a lot of us will still, like, I consider myself like pretty accepting of my body. I practice body acceptance, but I still have days where I don't like it. And that's kind of where like then body respect, which is more of like a verb, can come in, where it's like I still respect my body even on the days when I don't appreciate it and don't like it. Most days, like I think you can know you're working in a good place around body acceptance when most days you're accepting of your body and you're not harboring negative feelings, where the days that you feel like generally okay about your body, maybe even good, kind of outweigh the tough, kind of challenging body days.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for explaining all of the nuanced definitions.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that helpful? Do you have any like questions
Absolutely.
about that? Okay.
Yeah. And so with messages about our body, we hear so many internal messages and external messages in any given day. So let's first talk about like external messages and even like mass messaging that we may see from diet culture, whether it's magazines, on food products, and TV shows or commercials, on social media. How can we maybe reframe, or how can we react to that messaging whenever we see it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question, because I don't think many people realize how often they're internalizing that. It's subconscious for most people, which I would say is probably one of the like biggest challenges when leaving diet culture and trying to like break free from this belief system and work more towards acceptance in a more peaceful place. Like it can be really challenging, because then you are actually recognizing all those things all the time. And like for me personally, like it made me really angry. And it's like, well, I went from not realizing all of this, maybe just subconsciously internalizing these messages I'm seeing when I'm checking out at the grocery store and I see tabloids that are like blast fat in 10 days, or things like that, that really try to call your attention, and food labels. or even just like marketing you see like at the gym. It's things that we don't always pay attention to when we're just internalizing it, but we are internalizing those messages all the time. And so once we're starting to try and get away from diet culture and move away from those belief systems, we do start to recognize those things. And it can actually be really challenging to say like, oh, I'm seeing that all the time. And it's frustrating because now I'm paying attention to it and I see it everywhere. Like, oh, I didn't think about it before. And now it's everywhere and it's in my face and it's annoying. And so one of the biggest things that I recommend people to do is to actually like call it out, because when we call it out and we no longer internalize it, we can recognize that it's like an external belief system that we don't have to believe in anymore. So I always will have my clients when they go to the grocery store, when they're shopping, when they see like media commercials, even like podcast advertisements I hear, it's like, I tell them, I'm like, call it out instead of saying like, oh, this is this messaging and absorbing it. Say like, oh, that is diet culture messaging. And then, you know, you can always come up with like a mantra or something that like feels true. So like for me, I would say like, oh, that's diet culture messaging. And like, I don't believe in that anymore. Or I don't buy into that anymore. Or that causes me more harm than good. And it just kind of gives me that reminder that, oh yeah, that's what it is. And I don't need to absorb it anymore because I am working on, you know, moving away from that entire belief system.
And then whenever we hear these external messages directly from people,
Mm.
so let's say in one scenario, it's maybe an acquaintance, and then in another scenario, someone who you're closer with. What are some ways that people can navigate these conversations?
Yeah, that's really tough. And it's a tough position to be in for anyone. And like, first of all, I want to say, if you feel like you're in a place where you can have that conversation, that's like a really brave place to be, because so many people do struggle with their body in silence. They don't feel comfortable sharing it with people, even though it's probably one of the one things we have in common with most other people is that we struggle with our body image. And so I think it's really brave to want to speak up and like maybe try to combat some of that. So I would say when it comes to people you may be close to, I have found that it has been easiest to just be completely honest and open in a kind and compassionate way. Um, Always remember that people are not usually coming from poor intentions when they make these comments. They don't always think about the effects that it has on other people. And most of the time, it's not even about us. It's about them and their own feelings and thoughts towards themselves. And we can forget about that in the moments when they come up, and it might be hurtful, whether they're talking to us or just in making general like sweeping statements. But for someone close to us, I have found that it is best to say like, hey, I'm actually working on making peace with my body and I'm trying to be more accepting of my body. And I find that these comments kind of get in the way of that process. So I think just making a kind, simple statement to start, like that can be helpful. Just letting that person know what kind of journey you're on, so that they know maybe how their words are impacting you. If you want to take it a step further, because I do love the idea of people spreading this message, and the ideas behind it for those who are new to it, is if you feel comfortable, you're like, oh, easy, I don't have a problem saying that to like my friends. Maybe then say like, if you're interested in learning more, I'd be happy to share about it with you. That way they not only know like, oh, I shouldn't say this around, you know, Jackie, but maybe I should, you know, dive in a little further and learn about why it's maybe not helpful in the first place towards anybody. So I think, you know, if you feel comfortable with people, that's a really good idea. And then on the flip side, if you are really not comfortable, I always say like removing yourself from the situation. So I always like prep clients around this on the holidays. It's like if you're going to be around family that is making comments and it is not the kind of relationship with someone close where you feel like you can say something, you can change the subject, or you can get up and remove yourself to the restroom, give yourself the time you need to kind of like recoup and move through your tools that you have. Um, I think a lot of those apply for people we may not be close to. I think depending on the relationship, it may be easier to do those things towards someone you're close to. For others, it may be easier to do that towards like a general community. So as an example, I, as a yoga student, was in a class on a holiday one day, and the teacher made a comment about us earning some of the food that we were going to have that day if we stayed in our plank a little bit longer. And there's this idea in the fitness world that we earn and burn our food. And, I didn't know this teacher that well, but I found that to be pretty harmful, not just to myself, but I was like, who else in the class made that impact? And so going up to her after class and saying like, hey, I just want to let you know, what you said in class had this specific effect on me. That way it's not just this whole blame game of like, you did this, you made me feel X way, but more say your words had this kind of impact on myself. I don't know how others took it, but that's how I took it. And again, in both scenarios, keeping in mind that like that person, of course, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, is not meaning to be harmful with their words. They're just not educated on the matter. So like whatever situation you find yourself in, I think it's best to go into it with the reminder that you don't really know how much they know about this topic or their past or even how they feel about their own body. And so recognizing like they're not coming from a place where they're trying to harm anybody with their words, that they may just not know. And so you presenting it to them may be a really good learning opportunity.
Nice. I love how what really stuck out to me was the learning opportunity. And then I feel like it's important to like understand our own boundaries around it so that we can communicate that with others.
Right. Because this work, I mean, as much as like this work can be really important for like generations to come, it is really about our individual lived experience. And like no one has to, it's not a requirement to like make peace with your body that you correct everyone that you're around. And like I personally am a very passionate person in this space that I tend to sometimes overdo it a little bit if comments are made around me, but not everyone is in that position. They're more so like, I'm just trying to like accept my own body and be confident and happy with who I am. And like, if someone has questions, they can ask, but I'm going to keep to myself. So like boundaries are important, and recognizing like, don't overdo it and put yourself in a position that's like going to be a detriment to like the work you're doing on yourself.
So then that brings us perfectly to internal messages, right? So we, as you say, we were internalizing a lot of things that we've heard from mass marketing and maybe directly from people. And those all subconsciously or consciously turn into messages that we tell ourselves. So I guess, how do we work through those internal messages?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's probably the like one thing that people get stuck on the most. They're like, well, I understand why this is important, but I don't know how to do the work on myself. And a lot of it is really like rewiring our thoughts that we have, and being patient. So most of us have been raised in this culture that has led us and basically fed us messaging that we now have internalized as our own belief system. And so when we've lived in that for 20 plus years, it can take a lot of time to move away from that to where those aren't our automatic thoughts. So neuroplasticity comes into play, where we do have to really rewire the like pathways in our brains of where our mind automatically goes when we see those messages. For a while we see it and then we go to like, oh, my body isn't good enough. My body needs to change. It's just like the automatic pathway of our brain. And so it can take a long time to rewire. And it's a lot of conscious effort to rewire to where when we see those messages, it's not that automatic like thought pattern anymore, where it can slowly change. And so one of the ways that we can do that is to actually rewrite the thoughts that we do have. So what I would typically recommend for people is to kind of write down a list of the most like pervasive thoughts they have on repeat. Most of us will know what those are, or we can start to kind of build up that list by day to day, recognizing what might trigger those thoughts. And when we have them, write them down. So then you have a list of kind of those thoughts that come up that are challenging for you, that really make you not feel good about yourself. And then the idea is to rewrite them in a more like neutral or kind way. So for instance, if you have a thought that's like, I I need to lose X amount of pounds before I can be comfortable in a bathing suit this summer, then you can rewrite that thought in a more neutral way of like, my body is okay the way it is. And so basically, what you're doing is you're giving yourself a replacement thought that you can start feeding yourself. So it's almost like having a glossary you can go to. That way, oh, when that thought comes up again, if you have a trip coming up in like 2 months, every time that thought about like your body in a bathing suit coming up, you have now that interchangeable thought that you can replace. And it like I said, it's a lot of conscious effort, but you can then say, no, like that's an old thought pattern, and basically insert new, like neutral, kinder thought. And eventually those thought patterns and like neural pathways get rewritten. It just takes a long time.
Patience.
Yes,
I think that was one
exactly.
of the first words you said.
Yes,
Patience.
exactly. Right. Like my favorite like exercise is, okay, so if you're right hand dominant, like you write with your right hand every single day and, you can write your signature. Well, if I give you the pen and you put it in your left hand and I'm like, cool, write your signature, it's not going to look anything like the right hand. And it's actually will take daily practice, and it could take you, like a month and a half or longer before that left hand signature could look like the dominant hand. And so reminding people, when you've done something your whole life, like one specific way, and you're trying to flip that or do it really completely differently, you have to be patient with yourself. There's really no other way. You can't go over, you got to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. No shortcuts.
Yes.
So are there any tools, or do you have any favorite affirmations or anything around body acceptance?
Yeah. I would say, honestly, I'm not a huge mantra person, which is probably a surprise to a lot of people with like my yoga background and kind of some of this like internal dialogue work. I have found that one of my favorite tools when it comes to like body acceptance and just working towards like peace within your body is to find something that grounds you on the days when you are having a challenging body day. So when we first embark on this work, those may come up pretty often. They don't just go away overnight, and they can come out of nowhere. And so recognizing like what feels good on those days, how can you nurture just the relationship you have with yourself internally, and how can you take care of yourself? So practicing self-care. Two of those that I really like is touch. Like I have built a little bit more of a relationship with myself through just like a gentle touch. So oftentimes that's like hand on the belly, just to kind of ground me back in my body and bring me back to like me time. The other one is like finding clothes that are really comfortable. So I am very keenly aware of the way clothes make my body feel and the way my body feels in clothes. And so when I'm having a challenging body image day, I know exactly what clothes I can put on that are going to make me feel just a little bit more comfortable. And I know what clothes I can put on that are going to make it worse. And so just being aware of those things, like that is to me a form of self-care to myself, is putting on the clothes that I know my body will feel a little bit more relaxed in. So I always just recommend trying to find a self-care practice that looks beyond just like lounging on the couch in a face mask, something that actually like has you spending time with yourself or with your body. That way, as you move through this work, you have the tools that you can rely on when you do have those challenging days.
So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way, or where is the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram pretty often. I'm at Jacque, JACQ, .golden. And then I also have a website. It's just jacquelinegolden.com. So that's where I am the most. I've got a Facebook page I don't use very often, but everything is like pretty active on Instagram.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for your time. Thank you for helping us understand these different words within body acceptance and body positivity, some tools we can use whenever we are hearing those messages, and ways that we can be patient
Yes.
and patient with ourselves to go along this journey to body acceptance.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for having me.